Planned a dream birthday trip to Greece for my daughter, but my ex insists on bringing his stepdaughter, threatening not to come if I refuse. I 32F have been planning my daughter's, Rose, 13th birthday. For her birthday I've been planning a week-long trip to Greece. Rose has been obsessed with Greece for the longest time and has been begging to go there forever. And now I have finally saved up enough to give her a special birthday. The problem, however, is with my ex, Alex. Ever since I started planning the trip he has been pushing for me to invite his stepdaughter, Mary. For some context, Alex and I broke up a few years after Rose was born due to cheating during the pregnancy. We lost touch for a year or two before he came back asking to be in Rose's life. I agreed to co-parent with him, and things were going well, all things considered. That is until he got married to his new wife, Sarah, who already had Mary from a previous relationship. Sarah and I get along really well, and so do Mary and Rose. The issue is not with his new family but with Alex. Ever since he got married to Sarah, all his attention has gone to Mary. At first, I understood. He needed her to get comfortable with him being her new dad. But it has reached the point where he barely even puts any effort with Rose. He has missed several of her important competitions and events as well as her birthday just because he had to take Mary to the dentist, or Mary needed someone to pick her up from school, or he wanted to take Mary to the movies. All are excuses he has actually used when I confronted him about his absence in his daughter's life. I should clarify that I have no issues with Mary. I love the kid. But my issue is with Alex acting like she is his only daughter. I have talked to him about this several times, and he always uses the excuse that Mary needs a dad too, before telling me to stop acting selfish and to appreciate he was in Rose's life at all. While planning for the birthday I didn't invite Mary and Sarah deliberately so he could spend time with Rose on the trip. I did ask them beforehand if they were okay with it. Mary doesn't like traveling anyway, so they both agreed to not come. Alex on the other hand has been refusing to accept this and kept pushing for me to invite her anyway, saying it will be good for the girls to hang out. I have been refusing to budge and it all came to a head last week when I asked Alex to confirm the dates and he said he wasn't coming unless I invited Mary. I obviously said no, but he didn't back down. I finally had enough and told him that if he wouldn't come unless Mary came then he shouldn't bother coming at all. He tried to argue but I haven't spoken to him since then. He has been blowing up my phone but I honestly don't have the energy to deal with him. Some of my friends have been calling me asking why I uninvited him and saying I was acting like a bitch. My mom agrees he was being unreasonable but also said I was being cruel by kicking him from the trip entirely. My sister however agrees that he shouldn't come at all. I was very sure of my decision before but now I'm starting to think I overreacted. I don't want Rose to think he doesn't care enough to come at all, but if I agree he will spend the entire trip with Mary, I know he will, because he has done it before, and I don't think that is much better for Rose. Everyone is divided and I need to be sure whether or not I am overreacting. Am I being the jerk here? Edit, I was not expecting so many comments. I didn't expect this to get as much traction as it did and I am having some trouble answering them all and I won't be online for long. So I hope this answers your questions. The first I'm seeing is that my ex is Mary's dad. That wouldn't be possible. I have met her father, she looks a lot like him too. Does my ex have bad intentions with Mary? I don't think so. I could be wrong but I think he thinks of her more like the daughter he has always wanted. They also share many interests. Are Mary and Sarah okay with all this? No. They have been trying to convince him to let it go but my ex is very stubborn. I also asked them not to be involved so the drama would die on its own. Is this what Rose wants? She really wanted her father to come. She loves the man a lot, but I will ask her since it is her trip and her choice. Would she want Mary to come? Yes. Rose looks up to Mary and the two get along. Even without my or Sarah's involvement, they are naturally friends. If you have any other questions I will try and find the time to answer them. Update 1. I wasn't planning on updating, but since we're heading to Greece tomorrow Rose asked me to share an update for those who are interested. Here it is. I hope those curious about how things turned out are able to see this. After my last post, I called Rose's therapist for advice on how to approach the situation. Following his advice, I sat down with Rose, explained everything, and even showed her the post. I reassured her repeatedly that none of this was her fault and apologized for making decisions without coming to her first. I told her to take her time processing everything and let her know I was ready to listen whenever she was. I am glad I did so because a few days later, Rose came to me with her thoughts. Giving her time to reflect really helped her articulate herself and think everything through. She decided not to invite her dad on the trip but was against cutting him off completely. While I initially disagreed, I respected her decision and didn't push the matter. We discussed a lot of other things, but I'd prefer to keep those private. I also suggested family therapy, which she agreed to, and I've booked sessions for next year. She will still be going to individual therapy and so will I. I hope that it will help us communicate better and also help me with making better decisions in the future as her mom. By the end of our talk, we shared a much-needed cry, which, I admit, I initiated, hugs, and then watched Mamma Mia. Side note, to the commenter who suggested the movie, thank you. Rose and I loved it so much we watched the sequel the same day. It was the perfect choice to get us excited for the trip. We are thinking of watching it again by the end of the trip as well. Now, on to the drama. I reached out to Sarah and invited her over to talk about Alex. I showed her the post, including the comments concerned about Alex's relationship with Mary. While I didn't share those concerns, I wanted Sarah to decide for herself. As she read the post, she got to the part where I mentioned Alex's cheating. She was confused and asked what I meant. I explained how, during my pregnancy, I discovered texts and pictures from other women on Alex's phone. When confronted, he admitted to cheating because he wasn't ready to be a dad. That was why we broke up, and he disappeared for a while before returning to be part of Rose's life. Sarah was furious. According to her, Alex had told her I cheated on him, and that's why he wasn't involved in Rose's early years. According to him, it was because he wasn't sure if she was his. Hearing this, I was livid. I've never been with anyone other than my ex, romantically or otherwise. Between raising Rose and building a career, I never had the time. Alex's lie didn't even serve a purpose since Sarah and I had always gotten along. After our conversation, Sarah assured me she was going to talk to Mary and confront Alex. A few days later, she called me while crying, asking if Mary could stay with me for a while. I checked with Rose, and she was fine with it, so I agreed. From what Sarah told me, she confronted Alex about the real reason we broke up. During their argument, Alex was furious, possibly drunk. It is unclear, and hit her. Sarah had a visible bruise on her face when I arrived. I was and am still shocked by this. Alex had never been violent during our relationship and never even showed any signs of being violent. I am still having trouble believing it's true, which I feel really bad about considering how he left Sarah. A huge chunk of her face is swollen and bruised really badly. He didn't just hit her, he punched her really hard that she said she thought he knocked her out. Sarah doesn't have family nearby, and Mary's father is away due to his job as a pilot. So, Mary has been staying with us while Sarah handles the situation. After hearing about what happened, Rose invited both Mary and Sarah on the trip, which is incredibly kind of her. My sister canceled anyway since she couldn't secure a sitter and didn't want to travel with the baby yet until she is older. So it will be me, Rose, Sarah, Mary, and my mom. It was the same amount of people who were coming originally, so I didn't have to make new accommodations for them. As far as I know, Sarah hasn't made a report or anything yet, so Alex hasn't been arrested. As for why Alex wanted Mary to join the trip, his mom unintentionally told me everything. About a week ago she called asking to see Rose before we left for the trip. I wasn't really keen on the idea, but I agreed as long as Alex wasn't there. During our visit, she rambled on about how Sarah's family made Alex feel unappreciated, how Mary didn't call him dad, and how Sarah's ex-husband was always showing him up. Basically going on a rant about her poor son who everyone is against these days. You heard that right, folks. This idiot was doing all this not because he cared about either of the girls, but he wanted to be better than Sarah's ex. I am honestly still freaking pissed when writing this. He ruined his relationship with our daughter and used Mary to make himself look better than Mary's dad. I don't want to believe that it's the case and that I am misunderstanding, but it is something Alex Cannon has done before. I even talked to Sarah about it and she agreed this might be the case. Although it is just a speculation based on what his mom has told me. It is the most likely case since Mary has denied him being inappropriate with her. I have cut off Alex, his mom, and told Rose we can revisit seeing him only after I have a legal custody agreement and child support. Both can take a long time, which I am grateful for. I am hoping it will give Rose some time to think more about her relationship with her dad. Sarah has filed for divorce, which I'm helping with. She and Mary have been through a lot. Thinking about how this whole thing started, it feels so silly. Update 2. First off, Greece was amazing. The trip felt like the fresh start we all desperately needed. Rose was over the moon, especially since her lifelong dream of visiting Santorini and exploring ancient ruins came true. We visited the Acropolis, did a sunset boat tour, and indulged in so much baklava that I'm pretty sure we'll be eating salads for the next month. Surprisingly, Mary and Rose's bond grew even stronger during the trip. Mary initially seemed a little hesitant, probably overwhelmed by everything going on, but Rose made it her personal mission to ensure her stepsister had the time of her life. By the end of the trip, they were practically inseparable, giggling over shared selfies and inside jokes. Seeing Rose's kindness and how deeply she cared about Mary was a proud parenting moment for me. Sarah, despite everything she's been through, was an absolute rock. She was so supportive, and her gratitude for letting her and Mary join the trip was heartfelt. One night over dinner, she teared up and told me that this trip wasn't just healing for Mary but for her as well. She confided that it gave her the strength to move forward and focus on rebuilding her life. Now, onto the drama back home. When we returned, I was greeted with a flurry of voicemails and texts from Alex. Apparently, Sarah had served him with divorce papers while we were away, which seemed to send him into a tailspin. He called me, demanding to see Rose and spewing accusations about me poisoning Sarah and Mary against him. At this point, I'd had enough. I calmly told Alex that any communication regarding Rose would now go through my lawyer. I also made it clear that until he took accountability for his actions, both with Sarah and with Rose, there was no room for him in her life. I think that hit him harder than he expected because his tone quickly shifted from anger to desperation. He begged me to let him talk to Rose, but I stood firm. The biggest shock came when I was contacted by Alex's boss. Yes, you read that right. His employer reached out after hearing about his behavior from Sarah's lawyer, who had mentioned his drinking and violent outburst in the divorce proceedings. They wanted to verify if there was a history of instability. While I didn't want to get involved, I was honest about what I knew. Long story short, Alex is now on leave and undergoing mandatory counseling if he wants to keep his job. While I don't wish him ill, I hope this serves as a wake-up call. For the first time, he's being forced to face the consequences of his actions. One of the most poignant moments came when Rose told me she didn't want to see her dad right now, not because she's angry, but because she doesn't trust him to put her first. "I don't hate him, Mom," she said. "I just don't feel like I matter to him." Her words broke my heart, but I reassured her that she has every right to set boundaries. We've decided to continue therapy to help her navigate these feelings, and for now, we're focusing on the positive relationships in her life. She's also been spending a lot of time with Mary, which has been so good for both of them. Sarah and Mary are temporarily staying with us while Sarah looks for a new apartment. It's been surprisingly harmonious. Mary has opened up about how difficult it was living with Alex and how much she appreciates having a safe space now. Sarah has also found a new job and is making strides toward independence. What's truly incredible is how Rose and Mary have turned this chaotic situation into a beautiful bond. They've started calling each other bonus sisters, which warms my heart more than I can express. Now on to second story. Husband was caught red-handed undressing with his ex-wife at my son's birthday, and now I'm torn between forgiveness and heartbreak. I, 27 male, and my husband, 37 male, have been married for 3 years, dating for 6. He has an ex-wife, 37F, which he divorced a year before we met. We have a son, 7 meters, who was adopted after we got married and who I love as my own child, because he is. I know my husband, Peter, is bisexual. I have no problem with it, and I had no problem with his ex-wife, Allison. I did have a problem with his family as they're a bit homophobic and are always telling Peter he should get back together with Allison. Well, 2 weeks ago, we were at his family's town because it was my son, Jack's, fake name, birthday, and we wanted to spend it as family. My mother-in-law decided it would be a good idea to invite Allison, so she arrived in the middle of the party. I didn't want to ruin Jack's birthday, so I stayed quiet. I spent all my time with Jack, playing with him and his cousins at his request. When it was time to cut the cake, I noticed Allison and Peter weren't there, so I went inside and looked for them around the house. I found them in Peter's old bedroom taking their clothes off. I stood there in shock for a moment, but then I left and went back to celebrating Jack's birthday. Part of me wanted to scream and cry, but I also was in shock and I refused to make Jack's birthday about me. We cut the cake and opened the presents. People were already leaving when Allison and Peter came back. Peter took me aside and started saying that I shouldn't have cut the cake without him present and it was disrespectful. I stared at him and just said, "I'm sorry, I just thought you'd be too busy getting into your ex-wife's pants." He got quiet, so I took Jack and left the house to go back to the hotel. Once I put Jack in bed and made sure he was asleep, I locked myself in the bathroom and broke down. I called a friend and he tried his best to console me. I only calmed down in the morning when I took Jack for breakfast because I didn't want him to see me like that. I'm now watching him play in the park and I don't want him to suffer. I don't want him to have a broken family. I don't want him to know that relationships aren't a happy ever after. Peter has been calling and texting, apologizing for everything, and I'm tempted to forgive him. I'm tempted to just have my family back, and all my friends are saying that it was just a mistake, that he was vulnerable and Allison is his ex-wife. So what am I supposed to do now? I need the advice from people who don't know my husband or me personally. Update 1. Peter and Allison didn't notice me when I saw them. There was music very loud downstairs and they weren't facing the door. 2. I didn't stop them because I was in shock. I just stood there for a moment and I heard my son, so I unconsciously focused on him. I was pretty much in autopilot. 3. Peter didn't come to the hotel with me because I changed to a different one. He did try to follow me, but I took a taxi and left. As far as I know, he's staying with his parents and Allison left. 4. We met when I was 20 and he was 30, we started as friends, and we ended up dating. Yes, we're both men, and no, I didn't feel manipulated or groomed by him. Those were the most asked things and I did answer some comments, not all. Now on to the update. I did as some of you said and took some tests to discard any STIs or STDs. The results are coming back in a few days, and I will take another one in 3 weeks to be sure. My son is having a sleepover with a friend and I decided to speak with my husband. He came by our house. After a few minutes I texted him. He asked about Jack and I told him where he was. Then we sat on the couch and started talking. I started crying after a few minutes and he followed after. I asked some simple questions: when? Why? How many times? Among others, and this is what I could figure out by all the things he said. It happened for the first time when he visited his parents alone 2 years ago. They invited her, they both got drunk, he was feeling lonely as I had been more attention to Jack since we adopted him, and they slept together. Nothing happened again until our son's birthday party. He said his mother pressured him a bit and he caved in. I don't believe he did it for that reason, but I don't know. He said he doesn't love her and I believe him, but it doesn't negate the fact of what he did. After talking for a while, I told him that I wanted a divorce. He started sobbing and begging for another chance, but I told him that I can't give him another chance because I wouldn't be able to trust him again and I don't want that in a relationship. He kept crying and begging for another 30 minutes until I told him that we have to think about Jack and his well-being, that we could stay friends DS and co-parent him. He got mad, really mad. He started yelling that it was all Jack's fault, that we shouldn't have adopted him, that he's the one who's getting between us. I was crying and really scared. I had never seen him this angry. He hit the table and stormed out of the house. I called the house where Jack is staying at and told them if Peter shows up there, they can't open the door. After the little episode, I was scared that Peter would try to hurt Jack. I called my friend again, Thomas, and told him everything that happened. He came by and is staying with me until I'm better. Right now, I'm trying to figure out what to do and how to go on with the divorce. Update 2. Hi again. Sorry for taking so long to update, but it's been a chaotic week and I'm pretty shaken up, but I'll try to summarize it. My husband has been showing up at my work, following me, and calling me from burner phones. I was afraid he'd go after Jack like many of you said he would, but he didn't. He said a lot of stuff, but I'll try to write the important things. He said that he missed when we were just us, that I stopped paying attention to him when we adopted that Jack, that I wasn't his anymore. He said that he missed how dependent I was on him. I was very insecure when we met, but I started working on my issues when we adopted Jack because I didn't want to be a bad example for him. When we got married, I used to get sick all the time. I was weak and tired, so he would take care of me 24/7. The doctors couldn't tell what was wrong with me and I didn't get better until a bit after we adopted Jack. I guess that dependence, it's what he missed? Yesterday, he followed me to work and started screaming that I was his and that we made vows to stay together. We had to call security and he waited for me next to my car. I panicked and took a taxi home. He keeps messaging me and showing up to our house. I took a few weeks off work to be with Jack, although he's taking this better than me. I made an appointment with a therapist for him, and when the divorce is finalized, I'll go to one myself. Update 3. Hi guys, this is the final update for anyone who is interested. I'm only doing this update to give it some closure and because some people messaged me to ask for it. So here it is. This has been a really difficult time, but I'm almost divorced. I have primary custody of Jack, and I've got a restriction order against Peter and Allison. I'll try to be quick, but a lot happened. So, after I made the post, Peter kept calling and stalking me. I didn't know what to do until I started hacking Peter's stuff and I found a box of pictures of me before we met, like 3 or 4 years before we met, while he was still married to Allison. I never knew why they got divorced. He just said it was too painful to talk about, so I never asked. But I swallowed my anger and sent Allison a message to ask her about the pictures, and she told me that they got divorced because she saw him stalking my Facebook several times and found the same box I did. He called it an innocent crush and curiosity, but she thought he was cheating on her and they got divorced. A year later, he met me, but Allison always thought that I was the side piece. I read a few comments saying that I maybe was sick because he was making me sick. I don't know if that's possible. I don't really know. I mean, the illness were bad enough to make me stay in bed, like having a bad cold, but I don't know. I stopped digging. After I found the pictures, I confronted Peter without Jack in the house and he seemed, I don't know, proud? He kept smiling and saying that all he did was for us, that it was love at first sight, and we were destined. He was just making sure it happened. Apparently, we had met before we became friends. I remember meeting him at a party through some friends, but we met before, as teenagers. He and I lived in close by towns and my school made some trips to the towns nearby and we met on one of those trips. We were something like friends, but only for a summer because he went to college and I soon forgot about him. But he found my Facebook, and the story continued. I was horrified, to say the least. He tried to console me and tell me that it was fine, that he did it out of love, and that if only we hadn't adopted Jack, everything would be fine. I was bawling my eyes out. My entire marriage was a lie. He said that he only slept with Allison because he knew that it would get my attention and that we didn't have to go through with the divorce, that I know he loves me and that's it. He promised to be a better dad for Jack if I made more time for him. He told me to quit my job because he earned enough to take care of all of us and that would give me more time with him. I was in shock and then he hugged, calming me down. I admit that for a moment, I allowed him to hold me. I allowed myself to consider his proposal, but I kept thinking about his lies. It wasn't about the cheating, it was the stalking, the lies, the obsession. It creeped me out, so I tried to pull away and tell him I'd go through with the divorce. He refused. He hugged me tighter and screamed that I needed him, that he could protect me, he could take care of me, he could save me, that I was his husband and only his. I was terrified. I slapped him and pulled away, yelling at him to get out of my house. He didn't. He just kept screaming and holding on to me until a neighbor heard the commotion and called the police. I filed a restriction order and been taking care of Jack since. During the divorce proceedings, Peter asked for 50-50 custody, which surprised me because in all this time, he hasn't cared about seeing Jack, but I later found out that it was only because he would get to see me and talk to me regularly. He's been contesting every single thing about the divorce, trying to make it last longer than it has, and it's been working. He offered to give me child support even though we have 50-50 custody. He allowed me to keep the house, and other stuff. So, that's what's been going on in my life. The only happy thing that happened was Halloween. Jack insisted on dressing up as Spider-Man and me dressing up as Tony Stark, so we did, and I took him trick-or-treating. It was the most adorable sight ever and I knew I made the right choice with him and Peter.